To have Rav Blachman address us. Rav Blachman has been a Rosh Yeshiva since before, probably even some of your parents were born. Rosh Yeshiva, Yeshiva Keren B'Yavne. One of the when I was in Yeshiva, this is the door later, but when I was in Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael, he was a name that we all knew, and he's been machanech so many, both in the ways of Londus, brisker Londus, and Machshava, and has been such an inspiration to so many. I had the covet of meeting Rav Blachman in his home in Har Nof, I think 5-6 years ago, and at Keren B'Yavne, and we had the zchus of hearing the Rosh Yeshiva here in our Beis Medrash, but we never had that you were in Eretz Yisrael and we were here. So this is a first, and it's most appropriate for Yom HaAtzmaut. So without further ado, it's a great covet for us. We're very thankful to the Rosh Yeshiva for addressing us, and without further ado, I'll turn over the Zoom to Rav Blachman. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Steinberg. It's nice to see friendly faces. Do I see Rabbi Schechter over there? Yeah, he's there. Okay, so Gershon, very nice. Baruch Hashem. Okay, let's talk about Yom HaAtzmaut. Let's try to understand this a bit. This is quite complex. I actually today, I gave a shiur on this in Reshit last night for a full hour, and they wanted more. This can go on and on, so we're going to try to do this, as we say, lechem lefi ataf. We'll try to do it according to what the capabilities are for young high school boys, with the limited time allotted. There are many people which will give long speeches and shiurim about the holiness of Eretz Yisrael on Yom HaAtzmaut, and they will probably give many speeches about Yerushalayim and Chav Ches Iyar when we have Yom Yerushalayim. And it's quite ironic because in truth, Yom HaAtzmaut has nothing to do with the idea of Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is ours, was ours from the Bris Bein HaBesorim. I mean, la'alacha, it's that way. Ad kedei kach that the Rishonim, the Gemara asked the question: how could the Goyim make the trees of Eretz Yisrael avodah zarah? It didn't belong to them. It was belonged to us since Avram Avinu. I mean, the Gemara has its answers. Nothing happened as far as our owning Eretz Yisrael, as far as the kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, in the 8th day of Iyar, 1948. Hey, Iyar Tavshin Chet. No, nothing happened. Thus, to discuss the kedusha and the uniqueness of Eretz Yisrael, I mean, it's something we can talk about endlessly. There's like 3 good letter Gemara at the end of Ksubas which deal with it. The Ramban points out Bar Chava in the Sefer HaMitzvahs and also in his Pirush al Torah that it's a major value in Torah and Mitzvahs, Eretz Yisrael. It is the place where the real full kiyum of every mitzvah is only in Eretz Yisrael. According to the Ramban, being kiyum mitzvahs and chutzlor, it's a secondary reality. Sorry, guys. More than that, we know the Gemara says, I'm going to really make it terrible for you. The kol hador b'chutzlor, Jews which live in chutzlor, they are called oivda avodah zarah b'Torah. You actually have legalized avodah zarah here. What does that mean? So Reb Chaim Volozhiner explains in Nefesh HaChaim that only in Eretz Yisrael do you really have a direct hashgacha pratis. A direct, nothing happens, everything, the God himself makes the decisions. In Chutz La'aretz, there is the sar, what he calls the minister, whatever kli, whatever vessel, whatever a malach is, okay? Which he appoints him, you take care of New York State, you take care of Illinois. I'm sure there must be 2 different sarim there, because I'm from Chicago and never understood New Yorkers. So there must be 2 sarim there. So whatever it is, each Medina has its sar. And God works through the sar as opposed to having a direct relation. That's unbelievable. So the Gemara says it's like you don't have a direct relation with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. But that's true all year and has been that way from the beginning of time. So there's been absurd. This has nothing to do with Yom HaAtzmaut. Yom HaAtzmaut is not a holiday celebrating Eretz Yisrael. What is Yom HaAtzmaut? Yom HaAtzmaut is a holiday celebrating Medinat Yisrael, the state of Israel. The fact that we as Jews have an independent state in which our destiny is in our hands. We are no more, as knows a katan, the Agdar of a katan in halacha is that he's samuch al shulchan aviv. That he's dependent on someone else for sustenance, for nurturing. No, we are no more ktanim, which is samuch al shulchan acherim. We are not now depending on other nations, and we don't walk around saying, we have to behave nicely because not the local poets, noblemen will do something to me. No. We have our destiny in our hands. There's what you would call a malchus, and I'll explain that term, of Yisrael. Now let's understand before we go further, if anybody learns Tanakh the way you should, but at this age you should know Tanakh clearly. I remember when I was a little boy, my father made sure I learned a Perik a day. So today they have the English Tanakhs with everything there. What's the problem? Just read it. It's what we used to do on the big Sundays of Shabbos afternoon. There were no Jewish books for stories. So you either read the Hertz Chumash in English or you read the Encyclopedia Britannica. What was that to do? So we end up knowing Tanakh and a shtickle Askola. So at the end of the day, when you read Tanakh, you'll see that most of the time in Bayis Rishon, most of the Malachim were Oivdei Avodah Zarah. We're not religious. It's frightening, but it's the truth. Most of them were Oivdei Avodah Zarah and frightening. We're going to talk about Bayis Sheni, except for the first two generations of Malchus Beis Chashmonai. The rest of them were either Hellenized Jews, Tzidaikim, or people which weren't really Jewish. Mishpachas Hurdus v'Agrippa v'chulu. And yet this is all something as a value which is called a malchus. Ad kedei kach, we know the Gemara says that Eliyahu ran in front of the chariot of Achav. He was a terrible king. He murdered the prophets. He murdered prophets. They had to hide prophets in caves. And why did he run in front of him? To mechabed him, malchus. Because malchusa de ahara ke'ein malchusa de rekia. A malchus, a government of Jews with a Jewish king or a Jewish head of state, is an embodiment of the covet of the malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's why it's a Jewish value of Kvod HaMalchus. Obviously, this is something which should be celebrated, that all of a sudden we once again have attained a concept of Malchus, and I'd like to explain what that means. My dad, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, was a card-carrying member of Agudas Yisrael. A real Litvak, Galant, Rebbe Chanan, Barabarin, Barab Shimon, Baranovich, Kletz, Grodner, what more can you want? Okay. The people, the guy that the Cholim was a Chalim, a real late Litvak. And but on July 4th, he would hang out a very big flag, the old glory, the red, white, and blue would come out. It's like the old people in those days, like in the shuls, you had on the right side of the Yaron Kodesh, the American flag, and on the left side, the Israeli flag. Well, my dad, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, a real Talmid Chacham, used to unfurl the flag on July 4th. And on Hey Iyar, he would hang out the Israeli flag, a big one. And I remember in those days, in those years, asking questions was not just accepted, but it was celebrated. I always thank God for the educators I had, which did not run away from my questions, but actually celebrated them, embraced them. That was a generation of a lot of questions. Remember, we grew up post-Holocaust. My brother was burnt in Auschwitz. I had no grandparents, no uncles, no nothing. Just dad, mom, brothers and sisters. We couldn't exist without questions because there were so many of them. And therefore, parents and educators were open to answers. or trying to answer, or saying, I don't know. So I remember naturally looking at this and say, Dad, no, this makes no sense. You belong to the Aguda. The Aguda is not a Zionist organization. Knowing a bit of the history at the time, it's really nothing to do with Zion, with the regular political Zionism. Why are you hanging out this flag? And why July 4th? So he looks at me and says, and my dad had a great sense of history. And he said, do you know what it's like living homeless under the bridge? Taking clothes from a garbage can, drinking cheap wine in a brown bag, and eating scraps. Well, that was us through history. We lived in the cardboard boxes under the bridges in Riverside Park or wherever it was in New York. You know what I mean? We saw the beautiful world around us. We weren't part of it. And we really were homeless. Still remember once walking in Central Park in New York. I don't know if you know this, in Central Park West is a very exclusive building called the Dakota. That's where, very chashuva people live. President Nixon, Henry Kissinger, across the street, Norman Lamb, whatever it is, the ganz chashuva mentioned, the big wigs. And across the street, there's a place called Strawberry Fields where this great singer, what is his name, John Lennon was assassinated. And you know what was there? Next, across the street was this exclusive building, cardboard boxes in which people were living in. Unbelievable. And this is what we were like in history. We didn't belong to anything. No one wanted us. We weren't just persecuted, we were uprooted. We were nobody and nothing. We had no place which give us and allow us to thrive as people, as Jews. And you know what happened on July 4th, 1776 in Philadelphia? The first hotel opened up. And that was the first hotel for the Jews in history, which we got the keys and we walked into the Ritz-Carlton. And they said, you can have a home here. And actually, since then, the United States of America, that Declaration of Independence, which developed the state, was a place where Jews could finally find a hotel room. It's not yours, guys. But it is the place where we thrive, which we have thrived. We are thriving. It's unbelievable how Judaism is thriving, going through many different stages. I think at the moment specifically about Orthodoxy, when I was a child, we were sure that Orthodoxy was on the way out and conservative Judaism was busting at the seams. God works in wondrous ways, how today Orthodoxy is thriving and conservative Judaism is faltering in big time. Yes, it's a hotel. Torah has grown. Yiddishkeit has grown. I mean, whoever heard about like Chol Yisrael in Chicago in 1960 or 1956? Are you kidding? Whoever heard about even OU Hechsher? You looked at the ingredients. You know, after X amount of years, hey, it's not kosher anymore. Like, what happened? You know, that's the way it was. Judaism has grown. It's beautiful, qualitatively, quantitatively. This is a hotel. But at the end of the day, it's not ours. That other flag, he says, look at this blue flag, this white flag with the two stripes and the two triangles, what you call the Magen David. We finally got home. Now it's a lousy building. The pipes leak, the electricity doesn't work. We got crazy cousins living in the building. It's in a terrible neighborhood. They're out to mug you wherever you go. But it's home. It's yours. And that's what that flag is. I'm going to explain what my father taught me. He had a great sense of history, you know, forget everything else. Forget your politics, forget the, you know, this. Just think in terms of you were homeless, you had a hotel, and now you even have a home. What does this mean? You know, people think, you ask people, what is Judaism or what are Jews? So they'll tell you, well, it's a religion. Granted, it's people of an ethnic group. Okay, they have ties together. It's an ethnic group. It's a religion. Are they a nation? Well, define nation. Nation, if you take your Encyclopedia Britannica, you'll see a nation is a group of people which have a common ground equals land, language, and culture, history. Now, we all were once a nation. But then something happened and we were sent into Gullus. We were sent into Gullus and we lost a national identity. The church, part of its major theology going for many years, is called supersessionism. The idea behind it is that Judaism is not only a religion and a group of ragtag people, but they will never and have lost their right for nationhood. They're not a nation. I remember years ago, I was once in Paris and Shivasa B'Tammuz. I had to be there. My in-laws lived there. And well, what am I going to do in Shivasa B'Tammuz in Paris? There's no Kaisel to go to. What do you do? So I figured, I'm going to go there. There's an unbelievable museum there called the Louvre. And they have a great Roman pavilion. I'm going to look at a bust of Titus and Aspasianus. I want to see what they look like. I wanted to feel them and understand the Churban deeper. So I went there. And it was really interesting. And then I walked to another room in that pavilion and I saw a statue which floored me. And I sat there for over an hour and almost crying. I saw a very famous piece of art. It's called Synagoga and Ecclesia. The synagogue and the church. And let me describe this to you because it's really fascinating. Two beautiful young women, twins. One of them is dressed in majestic garment with a crown. She holds the staff of authority. Remember, if you go back to Chumash specifically, and also in Tanakh and in the Gemara, Shevet, a staff, is the symbol of authority and ruling, government. Lo Yasser Shevet mi Yehuda, there will always be government in Yehuda. The pasuk, as you all know. So she's holding the staff, and on the staff there's an orb, like a round ball. On top of it is the cross. This is supposed to show what they called Mother Church. She now is the nation. They did not see Christianity just as a religion, but they are now the new nation. Next to her is her twin sister, blindfolded, her garment torn. She does not have a crown. She's holding a staff, but it's broken. That was synagogue. That was Judaism. The belief was that God took away the national identity of the Jews. They will not be a nation anymore. His covenant is only with Am Yisrael, and there is no more Am Yisrael. There's a Das Yehudis. There's a lot of good things with Am Yisrael. A nation as a nation, they will be no more. And therefore, they believe that the covenant of Kadosh Baruch Hu with Am Yisrael moved to the church. And this is all found in a Medrash in Parsha Shmini, where it says, Mufurish, Asidim Umaisa Olam Loimar Anu Yisrael. The day will come when the Goyim will say, we are the new Jews. That's what you call the New Testament, which means the new covenant. God made a new covenant with the new Jews, with the new nation, for the old nation is not a nation anymore. Now, if this would only be the belief of the church, why would I care? Honestly, I couldn't care less. The problem is we as people believe the two. Most Jews look at Judaism as a religion, maybe some ethnic group to a certain extent. They don't define themselves as a nation. When you ask the typical boy living in Philly, what are you? They'll say, I'm an American of the Jewish faith. And you will describe Judaism as your faith. You're a Frenchman of the Jewish faith. You will never identify your national identity. I'm a Jew as your national identity. I'm a Jew which resides in the United States of America. I'm a Jew which resides in France. No. To the extent that the typical Jew did not really accept this, and when Theodore Herzl, I must say the honest truth, when he introduced the possibility that we have to start thinking ourselves as a nation, leaders of most segments of Judaism, I talk from the Orthodox to the Reform in Hungary, opposed them vehemently. We are not a nation. We are a people and a faith, but we are not a nation. And you must understand that God wants us to be a nation. I remember once reading, I grew up in Hebron Yeshiva, which is a development of the great Mesivta in Slobodka. The pictures on the wall were the Altar of Slobodka, Tzvi Finkel, and one of his biggest Talmidim was Rav Elio Kaplan. Rav Elio Kaplan was a chavus of my Rosh Yeshiva, of Rebbe Cheskel Sarna, Rosh Yeshiva of Hebron Yeshiva. And Rav Elio was at the time, very young, he was the Rosh Yeshiva of the Hildesheimer Seminary in Berlin. He passed away in his 30s. He wrote unbelievable things. He was enormously gifted. He was a poet. He was a Bucky Niflin Shas. He started writing a new Pirush on Shas. He wrote unbelievable. He was actually married to a niece of Reb Simcha Zissel of Kelm. Reb Avram Elia wrote a hesped on Theodore Herzl. Theodore Herzl was the man that created the Zionist movement. And it's printed in a book of his called Be'ikvot HaYirah. It's really worth reading. And he writes over there, I'll say it in English because I'm not sure how good your Hebrew is. He says, this fellow did not teach us Torah. He definitely didn't teach us Yiras Shamayim. How would he know? He grew up in an assimilated Vienna, in an assimilated country, in an assimilated city, in an assimilated family. So he definitely wasn't going to teach us things he didn't know anything about. And this is how he starts the Hesped. What did he teach us? He taught us something which we haven't said for generations. Maybe we whispered it in the base of Medrash, but we never would say it in the street. He taught us to stand up proudly and say, Ivri Anoichi. Mi Eretz Ivrim Ani. He taught us to say, I am a Hebrew. That's my identity. I'm not Hungarian. I'm not Austrian. I'm not French. I'm not English. I'm not American. I'm an Ivri. That is who I am. An Ivri. That's my national identity. I reside in Vienna. I reside in Paris. But my national identity is my Judaism is my national identity. Rabbi Avraham meant something very important. Does HaKadosh Baruch Hu want us just to be head of a religion, or does he want to be our king? Wants to be our king. We know that. You're daven Rosh Hashanah, you're daven Yom Kippur. Hamelach, Hamelach, Hamelach. He all wants to be our king. Well, then what is a king? Define kingdom. You know what a king is? It's I'll tell you a story. I was once in London, and Elizabeth the Queen, which is a very, very prominent lady, I must say the honest truth. She has a residence in what they call Windsor Castle. It's right next to Eton, famous school, and so around the castle they have these typical buggies and horses for tourists with the driver wearing a bowler hat and a vest, very English. And suddenly I see this guy over there. I'm waiting outside. My children are playing around. And I see him all of a sudden stand ramrod straight. And I looked at him and says, "Hey man, what happened?" He points to the flag, the standard of the queen, going up on the pole. He tells me the queen is in residence. And I had enormous Felicia Sadas, like, wow. As soon as he sees that the queen is in residence and he's next to it, he doesn't see the queen. He chaps pachad malchus and he stands ramrod straight. Covered malchus. What is it that makes the English go in the streets and have covered malchus for Prince Philip? Why did people go crazy about Charles and Diana? I don't know, all these different things. They all rush around the royalty. What is this malchus? A melech is a human being which embodies the national history and identity of the people. In him, we see the values, the history, all of the history of the people living on that little island is embodied in that man and that family. The covet of the Malchus is the covet of your national identity and its culture. Very similar to the covet you have, I don't know if they still do it in America, when I was a kid. So we always used to pledge allegiance in the morning. I don't know if they still do it. There was a flag in the class. We used to hold our hands by our heart. You know, once again, I was born in a DP camp in Germany after the World War II. So became a citizen at the age of 10. So, you know, so you were very happy. And I very proudly pledged allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which stands one nation under God, for liberty and justice for all. That, by the way, is the Pledge of Allegiance. And you know what I mean? Why did I feel emotional when I looked at that flag? You know why? Because that flag embodied the identity, the government, the malchus of my hotel. And I was very thankful for that hotel. When you look at the flag, you look at the flag of Israel, it's not just a rag with the top with a mug and David on it. That is a piece of material which embodies the national identity. Why do you think the Americans call the flag Old Glory, if you know that? It's our identity. It's the same reason that we honor the Senate and the Congress and the White House. You may have a jerk living there. Maybe the president is an idiot. Whether we're talking about Israeli presidents, Americans, it doesn't matter. But he embodies the national pride. The Melech is Liboy Lev Ha'am. His heart is the heart of the nation. God wants us to be his Malchus. God does not want to be the head of a religion. He wants to be our king. He wants us to see in him the source of our identity. He wants to see in him and his wisdom our culture, our language, the paradigm through which we perceive everything. An American, a French, English, Italian see things in different ways and therefore react differently through different things, and their language expresses it. If you travel more and see differences, you know, once again, I grew up in Chicago, studied in New York, did travel quite a bit. And let me tell you, there's such big differences between the Cabot Lodges living in Boston and, you know, and the beer drinkers in Tallahassee, Florida. Come out, you wouldn't believe they're the same people. There are cultural differences which express themselves in the language, the vernacular, whatever it only be. A language of a nation is supposed to express, it's built from its cultural experiences. Which culture do you and me share? And the answer is we share and grew up in the culture of the Western world. And because we grew up with the Western world's culture, we can be quite queasy about certain things found in the Gemara and in the Shulchan Aruch. I mean, does everybody here want to, are you dying to see public flogging and capital punishment? And every day, Shemona Esrei, you say, Hashiva Shavteinu Kvar Rishona, We are Tzenuki Vatchila, Vashem Imenu, Yagon Vanacha. God, I'm full of pain and angst. Please bring me the old Sanhedrin with its halachas, which means Malchus, Ben Sairamayre, Zaken Mamre, and and there's Chiv Misa for Shabbos, and worse than that, if people don't act al pidin, even if there's no Chiv Misa, Besdin can hang up a few people just to make sure people start behaving. And something's for the American thought when you think about, do you really mean this? Because your American culture, which you grew up in and I grew up in, stands totally opposed to it. The idea of having a Melech HaMashiach, it's nice to talk about it as long as it's a theoretical reality. Do you really want a monarch? What happens if he's like Obama? Then you're stuck with him forever. Whoever said that the second or the third king will be a good guy? David was tremendous. Shlomo was unbelievable. Rechavam was an idiot. But that's Malchus. Do you want it? You can't vote them out. Do you want a court with Arba Mises Bezin and Malchus? Doesn't it remind you of the mullahs in Iran? Don't you see how culturally we are very far from a lot of major things in Yiddishkeit? So we kick it into metaphor, we make it comfortable, but the truth of the matter is culturally we are totally westernized. The product of our losing our national identity and losing our national culture. A lot of mitzvahs like that, a lot of things which can be quite queasy. You're learning Chumash Vayikra now. Do you really die to see skirted priests slitting throats of goats and sprinkling blood on altars? I don't mind reading about it and tell you some Shem B'Shmuel, which will tell you what it means in metaphysical, allegory. But no, this is really going to happen. And the music will not be Handel's Messiah or Mozart. It'll be this nasal music of the Levim, straight out of the Arab music that you picked up here in the area. That kind of stuff. That's what you're going to be hearing. It's very foreign to me as a product of the Western world. There's many others. I'm not going to go into it. I teach women, and usually they ask me, Rabbi, what's this thing about only a man can divorce and not a woman? And I understand where she's coming from. I identify with her totally. But obviously the Torah sees things differently. I'm not going there at the moment. I'm just trying to give another example. We are very, very far from the cultural reality of Torah becoming not just my belief, not just what I do, but how I see things. I'll tell you a story. It's really amusing. Lately they think that they found the Techelis. I choose to differ, but this has been common. People thinking they found the Techelis. And here I am on a train from New York to Baltimore. Baruch Hashem, I have 2 hours and no one's going to bother me. I can sit and learn, I can rest. And as I'm sitting down, someone comes over to me and says, are you Rabbi Blachman? I really want to say my name is Schwartz. But, he knew who I was. He says, yes, how can I help you? Which is the next part of the sentence. So he says, listen, he's marketing the Techelis. And you know what? I'm willing to give you 4 packs annually, which is quite expensive, if you wear them. So I said, but I don't wear my tzitzis out. So it doesn't matter. Your students will know. So you want me to be your billboard? So I said, no, but it's a good thing. So I didn't know how to get rid of him. So I said, something, I would love to do this for you, but I can't wear tchelis. And he says, why not? Because it doesn't work for me. He says, what do you mean? It says in the Chumash that you wear tchelis, you think of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And the Gemara says, how? Because when you see blue, you think of the beach, you think of the ocean. You think of the ocean, you think of the sky. You think of the sky, you think of Kisei HaKavod. Says, listen, young man, I don't know where you are. When I think about the beach, I don't even think about the water. When I finally think about the water, I really don't think about the sky. I looked at the sky multitudes of times. I actually enjoy astronomy a lot. Never thought about Kisei HaKavod. It doesn't work for me. What do you want from me? Why would I put it on? He looks at me and says, are you real? He says, of course I'm real. He understood I was telling him to leave and he walked away. But it wasn't a joke. It is the truth. The Torah took for granted if we would live with real Jewish culture, we would see blue, we would think ocean, sky, Kisei HaKavod. We are so far from biblical man, which halacha hoped and wanted us to be. This is the churban of the Golus. The churban of Golus is, religion thrived in Golus. Bavli was written in Golus. Even Yerushalmi was written under Roman rule and Persian rule. What are we talking about? The Shach did not exactly live in Tveria and the Magen Avram didn't live in Tzfas. Religion thrived in Golus. What was destroyed was national identity and therefore keeping us open to assimilating with the local cultures. We were under the bridge, we were samuch al shulchanam for how we see things, and we still are. We believe the church that we are no more a nation. We assimilated with everybody else. We believe that Sar Shevet mi Yehuda u'mechakik mi bein Raglav, that the staff is broken. In Ches Ir Tavshin Ches, HaKadosh Baruch Hu came out and told the world, Loi Yoser Shevet mi Yehuda. Nationhood will never leave this nation because they are a nation. And they will have their country and they will have their government. And I will give them the tools through which they will finally be able to break the shackles of Western society's culture and internalize the culture of Torah and mitzvahs. God invited us again to regain our national identity. That's what Chet Iyar really is. Medinat Yisrael is an unbelievable gift of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of giving us against the chance of regaining our, transforming our Judaism into our national identity, ultimately our culture. Now in the Zohar HaKadosh it says that the Geula goes in two stages. There's a Mashiach ben Yosef, and then there's a Mashiach ben David. The Zohar HaKadosh writes that what is Mashiach ben Yosef going to do? He's going to create the external format of country, government, etc. Mashiach ben David will then finally, after all that is in place, inject us with our culture. We will go through a cultural metamorphosis after we've become a nation. Rav Kook actually writes a lot about this in a famous article called Hamispeid B'Yerushalayim. Really worth reading, whoever can. You see these things and you understand what's been happening for the last 73 years. God has basically, through Hashgacha Elyono, through whoever he used, I couldn't care less, whatever organizations, whatever peoples, we have regained a national identity. To a certain extent, I wish all of you would take that in and say, yes, we are Hebrews that live in America. But now you can. If I think of the resurgence of Jewish identity in the ex-USSR, which today is called Russia and its republics, which has a lot to do with the victory of the Six-Day War. If any of you knows or lived at that period, you would know that the father of the Tshuva movement is not Rabbi X or Rabbi Y, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvoide be'atzmai in the Six-Day War. A resurgence of Jewish pride as a nation, brought thousands to the Akafis and Simchas Torah in Moscow, and so on and so forth. All this is the presence of God given to us in He'iyar, Tav Shin Ches. So you know what? Yes, this is a very important day theologically. I don't care how you celebrate. Honestly, let everyone follow his family custom. But whatever you do, when you say moedim, at least, think about thanking God for giving us another chance to regain national identity, ultimately giving us the tools of translating our Torah and our mitzvahs, not just what we do, not just what we believe, but the basis of our philosophy of life, our value system. The key mitzvah of Malchus is when you can translate values into reality. That's what it is. Malchus Hashem is when you translate you take Torah and mitzvahs, and it becomes your paradigm, your culture. You start talking differently. Things mean differently to the uncultured person because he has a rich culture behind his words. Therefore, he understands different things. There are different nuances. You know, before I got married, I had a shmooze with the mashgiach of our yeshiva. He was a big Talmud of the Alter Slobodka. His name was Rameir Chodesh. So I had spent 10 years in Chevron Yeshiva before I got married. And he asked me, well, what did you learn here? And I had there for like 15 minutes, telling him almost every book I read. Unbelievable. I didn't know what he wanted from me. He kept asking, what did you learn? What did you learn? What did you learn? Okay, I finally got through the list. I didn't realize it, okay. Then he looks at you and says, you didn't learn anything here unless you can pour all that in the cup of coffee you're going to give your wife in the morning. I learned two things. First of all, a good husband pours a cup of coffee for his wife in the morning. Okay. Second of all, the person who learned but become Mesivta of Basra, Gittin, Kedushin, Yavamis, etc., Uksin, Mikvois, Zroim, Tyrus, whatever it be, he pours his cup differently. His value system has been formed. His way of looking at people is different. And that's the cup of coffee he's going to be giving to his wife. That's the kiyum of Malchus Hashem. When everything is translated, not just in what you do and what you believe, but how you see things. You learn about Mitzvah. You develop enormous respect for people's monies. You learn a geisel. Wow, didn't Pruta, didn't Mea becomes part of your fingers, and you won't touch a paperclip. When you learn different Gemara, you learn the different Masechtas, you realize values. The Ramban writes that it's not enough to know halacha. You have to distill the halacha into values. It's a Ramban in two places, in the pasuk of Asisas Ayasher Satayv and the pasuk of K'dashim Tiyu. He talks about learning halacha and translating into values, distilling it into values, would change the way you think and act. There's no pasuk that says you can't eat like a slob in a restaurant. You know, if you go to New York restaurants, that they sit next to each other, the guys have the steak in their face. But the Raman says, but if he does that, he didn't learn Torah, because if he learned Torah, he would understand the values of Torah. He wouldn't act that way. Living a heathenistic, self-centered lifestyle is the antithesis of the values coming out of Torah. But how are you supposed to know them? You're supposed to listen to the values, not just the laws. Like, what does it represent? What's the philosophy behind the law? You can only do that by learning a lot and thinking a lot. So that's how I celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut. I celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut by thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu so many times today of giving me living in this period of history in which we see so many nisim and niflos of God giving us back our national identity within a few years after we were about to be totally destroyed. And now my job is to bring Mashiach ben David to fill that national identity with my Jewish culture. every time you do a mitzvah or give more depth to your religion, you're bringing that closer. You're making this beautiful, I would call, edifice of Mashiach ben Yosef, of this external malchus, meaningful, because it's a means to an end. The country, the language is there for the culture. Kadosh Baruch Hu wants to be a melech. So I hope and wish that this will be a meaningful thing for you, and take these ideas and internalize them. This is important, not just for today, but for the rest of your lives. Torah has to be in your blood. It's got to be a you don't visit sick because it's a mitzvah. The mitzvah is to become a sensitive person which will visit the sick because it is normal. Because you're compassionate. It's often a Rambam, by the way. We have to become, Judaism has to be our bloodline. It's the way we see things, the way we feel. You know, if you learn Chafetz Chaim, you don't speak Lashon Hara because it's usher. You see, you don't speak Lashon Hara because how could you? That's the way it should be. So learn a lot, and learn a lot. A lot of learning to do. But always remember, whatever you do, try to ask afterwards, okay, what's the philosophical, what's the meaning behind this? What can I take home with this? You may not find it in the first 3 lines of the Gemara. When you finish a sugya, you should be able to translate somehow into some philosophical underpinning, into a principle, into a value. You will know what is yashar and what is taiv. You will know what it is, how to live as a kadosh versus the opposite. Have a great day. Make the most of it. You're young. Grow. Don't waste time. I always say, don't kill time. It's your best friend. Have a great day. Take care. Shalom. Thank you, benched. Bye,
Thank
Rabbi
you very much. Thank you, Rav Lachman, for giving us so much to think about. We're sending Baruch Hashem some excellent Talmidim to Keren B'Yavneh. Next time we hear the Rosh Shiva, we should be not under the sorrow of Zoom, but together with you, Be'ezus Hashem. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
but then you're going to have to come to Keren B'Yavneh because I've stopped traveling.
Okay, good. All right, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, bench. Bye. Call
Okay.
too.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Bachman.
Everybody. Bye.